independent, an example for our district, example for my colleagues, and hopefully an example for people at home in how they treat each other and talk to each other, and try to work toward a conversation that is more respectful than what we see right now in politics. When I ran for Congress as a Republican, I really did believe that I could go in and change things from within the party. And I'm not here to pick on Republicans. I know there's a lot of Republicans here, and I'm sure there are Democrats here as well. But I thought I could go in and at least be able to change my party, the Republican Party, and convince it that it was doing things the wrong way. And I don't mean that they were too conservative. I'm obviously constitutional conservative. My views are libertarian, as all of you know. I've been representing the district for a while now, so I think you're all pretty familiar with how I vote on things. I'm fiscally very conservative, of course. So it's not about whether you're conservative or not conservative. That's not the issue. The issue is when you go to Washington, you find that the parties are run completely top-down. A few people make all the decisions for everyone. And there's no real way for rank and file members to participate in the process. And as a result, people at home are, in a sense, being disenfranchised. You are being told that we have a system where you have a legislative process and you can elect people and they can go and do things for you. But what actually happens in Washington is the President and the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader, regardless of which party they're in, they work together and they decide all the things for everyone. And then they come back to the members of Congress and they say, well, this is what we decided, now we need your vote. And my hope was I could go in and at least change the Republican side of that, to at least convince Republicans, hey, let's open this up, let's make this a fairer process. And for many years while I was in Congress, of course, Republicans had the majority. So if you wanted to really change the process and change things, I was in the right place. I was a Republican member with a Republican majority, and I thought I'd have the opportunity to do that. And I discovered that no matter how hard I tried, and no matter how hard my colleagues tried, we couldn't really change it. And a lot of them at some point, I'd say in the last few years, just sort of gave up on changing it. They've sort of succumbed to the system and decided they're just going to go with it and try to wait it out. Those who are really upset with the way things work, many of them are just retiring. They said, I'm hanging it up. I have colleagues every day who come up to me and tell me how frustrated they are, how much they want to be an independent, how angry they are with the whole thing. But they are convinced that if they went independent or if they did something else like buck their own party on a whole bunch of issues, that they'll get voted out of Congress. And so most of them, instead of trying to fight it from going forward, they're deciding to retire. And I don't believe in doing that. I want to go and fight for you, and I want to set an example for people and show that an independent representative, an independent member of Congress can go and make a difference and can represent his constituents and can get elected. And I believe very firmly that most people are independent-minded. Most Americans are very independent-minded. And there are some people on either side of the aisle who are very loyal to the party above everything else. But it's not the majority of people. But I think those people who put party loyalty first are the loudest voices on social media. They're the loudest voices in the media as well. If you go to Fox News or MSNBC or wherever it might be, it's people who are party-first people who control a lot of the messaging. But most Americans aren't like that, and I think most Americans appreciate an independent voice. So I'll tell you a little bit about how frustrating it's been and how we can change it. Under Speaker Ryan, for the first time in Congress's history, we were not allowed to amend anything on the House floor without pre-approval by the Speaker. In other words, if you had an amendment to legislation, you had to present it to the Speaker and he had to give his stamp of approval or you weren't getting a vote on it. Now, for those of you who don't know, that's not how our system's supposed to work. We have a system that's designed to be open and deliberative. In fact, the House rules are expressly written to provide for a very open process. This goes back to the founding. They're supposed to be very open. And particularly on spending legislation, like appropriations bills, you might have heard that word. You're supposed to have a very open process where people can come to the House floor and offer any amendment. Nowadays, in order to get an amendment onto the House floor, you have to present it to the Speaker. It goes to the rules, a thing called the Rules Committee, which is run by the Speaker. And the Speaker will decide whether to allow it. And you can imagine how this works. If the Speaker thinks that the amendment has no chance of passing, then they'll allow it. The Speaker will say, okay, this is good to go because it has no chance of passing. If the Speaker thinks that the amendment doesn't do anything, it's just like a messaging amendment, they just want to add some nice message to a piece of legislation, but it doesn't have any substance, they'll allow that one too. But if the amendment will do something and has a chance of passing, they say, no way. We're not allowing that amendment because we don't want members of Congress actually legislating. They just want members of Congress giving a stamp of approval. And this was, as I said, under Speaker Ryan, this was the first time in Congress's history that it worked that way on every single piece of legislation. So far under Speaker Pelosi, it's also worked that way. So we've had 2 in a row now, where throughout our history we had a more open process. It certainly was not good under Boehner. I'll say that, and it hasn't been very good for many years. But it's gotten progressively worse to the point where now it's totally closed down. And as I mentioned, the rules of the House are generally very open. So how does this happen? How do we change the rules? Well, every single week, members of Congress vote to waive or suspend the rules of the House. Every single week. So at the beginning of the Congress, we pass a set of rules for how we will conduct business, and then every week we suspend the rules or waive the rules. Some rules, for example, say you need like a 2/3 majority to do something. You know what they do when they don't want to do the 2/3 majority? They use a simple majority to suspend the 2/3 rule. I've actually seen that happen, where a simple majority got rid of the 2/3 rule on a piece of legislation, which is nuts. Like, what's the point of having the 2/3 rule if you can just waive it with a simple majority? So this happens week after week, and you have just a few people deciding everything for everyone. And you can imagine in this system how it creates a lot of dysfunction, it creates a lot of animosity and anger. And instead of debating ideas, people turn to name-calling and other things. Our system's supposed to be a deliberative process. We're supposed to have a deliberative process. What separates us from other countries is our system. And I think we don't appreciate that enough. We're so focused on these substantive outcomes, whether someone supports this issue or that issue or another issue. But really, we're forgetting our system. We're letting our system deteriorate to the point where all the issues you care about, the ones you care dearly about, can't even be debated properly. If you're on the left and you have particular issues and you want them debated, you think they're being debated under Mitch McConnell? No, they're not being debated under Mitch McConnell. If you're on the right and you want things debated, you think they're being debated under Nancy Pelosi? No, they're not. These things are being shut down, and it shouldn't work that way. It should be open and deliberative. And as I like to say, the outcome should be discovered through the process. They shouldn't be predetermined by a few people in leadership. It should be discovered. We should take our ideas and find out what the will of the people is through our debate and deliberation. And sometimes that means I'll be on the losing side of things, and sometimes I'll be on the winning. But you know who really wins in this process? Americans. We all win if the process is good. It doesn't mean every time you have an issue, you're going to agree with the outcome. But if the process is open, I will guarantee you will be happier than you are now. You will find that there are more times when the outcome is in your favor than if we have a closed process. So, you know, if you disagree with me on issues, and I know you do on some issues, for sure, there's nobody who agrees with anyone else on everything. My family doesn't agree with me on everything. Nobody agrees with you on everything. You know, we'll all agree with some of each person's ideas. Some of you might agree with me on 90%. Some of you might agree with me on 30%. That's all fine. I think the most important thing is that we open up the process, because let's suppose you and I disagree on a particular issue, and I'm sure there are some issues like that. If I'm not representing you on that issue because I have a different perspective, if you have an open process, someone else will be there making the debate, making the argument for you. And that's how it should work. And then we just have a vote. And if your opinion is the one that's favored by the majority of Congress, and even if I disagree with that opinion, guess what? It's going to pass. If the majority of Congress agrees with you on it, it will pass. So I think much more important than whether a member of Congress shares all of your views on a particular piece of legislation or particular issue, much more important than that, by far more important, is whether the member of Congress wants the process to be open or the process to be closed. And I can tell you that there are a lot of members of Congress who want the process to be closed. And in fact, it's probably the majority of members of Congress by a significant margin, and it's certainly, I think, the majority of candidates who run for office. They prefer a closed process. Why do they prefer a closed process? Well, think about it. If you have a closed process where the leadership team decides everything for you, you don't have to think. They like that. A lot of members of Congress, they like the idea they don't have to think. They just go to Washington, and their leadership team says vote this way, and they vote that way. And then they have the media on one side or the other drumming up support for that position, saying, well, the Republicans are always right, or the Democrats are always right. And they go home, and as long as they're in a particular district that's Republican or Democrat, they'll just win re-election. So they like the idea of a closed process. What do they want? They don't want to have all these votes. They prefer having fewer votes. You think they want to go out and have to do all the fundraising on their own with no party behind them and all that? They like having allegiance to someone who then will help fund all their campaigns. If you stick with the party, guess what happens? I want to say this on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans. If you stick with the party, guess what happens? They will give you the committees you want. They'll fund your campaigns. They'll give you chairmanships. They do all sorts of things. And then when you're challenged in an election, they'll say, oh, no, we stand with him. We're sticking with our guy. And they'll put millions of dollars behind you. So why would any of these people want to think when you really analyze it? They don't want to think. They just want to go there and do what they're told. And while they might like that, and it might make their life easier, and maybe that person can stay in Congress for 30, 40 years doing that, it is not good for the American people. It is very dangerous for the American people. And we need to stand up against that. And it's only going to change if people at home stand up and speak out. It will not change from within. I'm coming here today to tell you that. I switched to independent to help make that point. It is not changeable from within. It cannot change from within. It has to change from the outside. And I'm using my position now as an independent to go set an example and go speak to people and to tell you, you need to speak up. When you hear candidates talk, you need to ask them about the process. Because a closed process will not allow you to get the kind of outcomes you want, and it will not allow us to have the kind of country that we're supposed to have, where people can discuss all different ideas. So, I think we need to do it ourselves. We need to work together. And that means, above all, we need to start respecting each other, caring about each other, understanding each other better. I've been to different parts of the district today. There are parts of the district that will have very different opinions from this part of the district. There are people in this room who have very different opinions from each other. And that's okay. Just because someone has a different opinion from you does not mean the person is bad or evil. People come to their positions based on their experiences and their backgrounds. They're, in a real sense, the product of their environment. And if you believe certain things about government, whether it should be doing this or that, or whatever issue you may care about, it's a product of the environment you grew up in, or the friends you had, or the people you encountered. And it led you to believe a certain thing. And so if we want to convince each other, instead of saying that the other side is evil or bad, that Republicans are always bad or Democrats are always bad, instead of saying that, we need to understand that people have different opinions for good reasons, genuine reasons. It doesn't mean those opinions are correct. It doesn't mean their philosophy is correct or their positions are correct. But it does mean that we should be respectful, and we should talk to them and try to persuade them in an honest way. Not by calling names, not by being hateful, etc. And that's why I do take a lot of issue with the way the president talks. I think there are people on the Democratic side who also talk in ways I don't like. But the president is the highest office holder and should set the example for everyone. I think that's really important. I think above all, if you are president of the United States, you have to set an example for people. And I don't think he's setting a very good example right now, at least on that front. Regardless of whether you agree with him on an issue or not, or on a number of issues, I think we need to have people at the highest level setting the right tone, setting the right example. It's easy to say, well, the other side will never do the right thing, so why should we do the right thing? It's easy to say that. But being moral, being ethical is about doing the right thing first without expecting someone to reciprocate. And the only way we'll ever get past all this animosity is if we do that, if we show love to people who are not necessarily showing love to us. With that, I'll open it up and I'll take some questions. And thanks again to Railtown Brewing for having us here today. So thank you.
Just about one comment.
Yes.
I agree 110% with every word you just said. However, I'm concerned that with your move, the door is open wider than it was, to allow other people to represent this district with people less qualified than you, and they're going to be butt kissers, my words, the tribal butt kissers.
They will be tribal butt kissers. I agree with you on that.
I'm worried for you, and I'm worried for the district.
I am not worried. I have faith in people. Actually, I think, I would say one of the characteristics that has allowed me to go independent, and has allowed me to be independent all these years, is I've always had a lot of faith in the district, in the people I represent, in the American people. I have a lot of faith in people. I think that most Americans, even if they're not following all the issues, can tell the character of people. And I think most people in this district understand that even if they disagree with me on something, they know where I'm coming from, they know where my heart is, and that I respect everyone in the district, and I listen to everyone in the district, and we might not agree on every issue, but I will go and do the thing that I think is right under our Constitution according to the principles that I laid out. So I am not worried about it. I think that people will make the right decision. I also think that for me, I have to make the right decision regardless of what the consequences are. But I do believe in people. I believe in this district. I believe most people in this district, even if they are Republican or Independent or Democrat, even if they are Republican or Democrat, I think most people in this district are independent-minded and are willing to break from their party in order to vote for someone they believe in.
How do you keep that fire in your gut when the whole world looks like fireballs?
So, it's all of you, honestly. People are very kind to me, actually, like everywhere I go. You might think that as a member of Congress, you get like a lot of people being mean to you. I get plenty of that on social media, but actually, as I go around the district, people are very kind. And I fly, back and forth every week, and people greet me in the airport, and even people who disagree with me on a whole bunch of issues say very nice things to me, and that means a lot to me. It makes a difference. I can go to Washington and do what I think is right according to the principles I laid out and according to what I told the people I do, even when people are coming after me. So, it really is all of you who make it possible. I have a great family as well who are very supportive, including like my brothers who have stayed involved all these years, just like being supportive and talking to me and making sure I'm doing the right thing. But really this community has been fantastic.
You give us hope and we need it.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Yes.
After listening to what you said, I almost feel like despair. Like nothing I can do can possibly make a difference. And I believe with a lot of what you say. I like the fact that you're going I send you back, what are you doing?
Yeah. So don't have despair. First of all, things are bad in Washington right now. And again, I don't want anyone to, I think it's too easy to pin it on the president and say, either some people don't like the president or Justin doesn't like the president or whatever. I've had concerns about the system for years. I think President Trump is not the cause of this stuff. I think that a lot of what he does is a symptom of the problem, and he's reflecting what the American people, are doing. You know, how we've been treating each other. I think he's been reflecting that. How many people, at least on social media or in those kind of forums, how we treat each other. But I would not have despair. Our country has been through so much. I mean, you know, we've had times in history that were extremely dangerous to our country, where it seemed like maybe we wouldn't survive. We had times in history where people were discriminated against in very severe ways. We had slavery in this country at one point. We've always learned to be better. We've taken our founding documents, our Constitution, our Declaration, and we have applied them more consistently over the years. So there was a time where we had these beautiful words on paper, but we didn't really follow them. You know, we didn't follow them at all. Like, there was a time when they talked about everyone has the right to life, liberty, and happiness, and there was slavery in the country. I mean, it's astonishing that they could write those words and still have slavery. So things have gotten progressively better. I think we're living in the best time in world history right now. But that doesn't mean there aren't serious problems in Washington, and it doesn't mean that we can't regress. Things can go backward, and that's what I'm worried about. What I'm worried about is that over the past 10, 15 years, I've been watching politics and I've been involved in this, and I've seen it take steps backward, where we are becoming more sectarian. We are abandoning our founding documents instead of improving things as we've done for so many years and so many generations. I've seen us take a step backwards at times, where we're turning on each other, and it's becoming, you know, right versus left, red versus blue on everything, and nobody listens to anyone else anymore. We have relatively good economic times now, and people are still very angry and upset. So that's concerning. What if the economy were to get bad and people are this angry and upset? Who knows what would happen? So we have to pay attention to what's going on, and we have to care about each other. And if we do that, there will be more people in Congress who follow my lead. There will be more people who are an independent voice, and more people to set examples for others.
But how you as an independent, a Republican or a Democratic speaker, to approve anything that you want to do?
So that's a good question. The point I've been trying to make is that nobody has any influence over the Speaker or the Senate Majority Leader. All of the members of Congress, including the members within those parties, don't have any power. They're being told what to do from the top down. So the only difference from my perspective is that I can go and talk to people in the district and not have people concerned that I've been on one side or the other. I'm making it clear I'm independent, and I will represent everyone. I'm not beholden to President Trump or Senate Majority Leader McConnell or Speaker Pelosi. I'm not beholden to any of them. I'm not beholden to the interest groups. I'm willing to take them on, as I've always been willing to take them on. And I will represent you. My colleagues, they don't have any power. My Republican colleagues, they don't have any power. My Democratic colleagues, they don't have any power. But they're also beholden to these leadership teams, and they're not even making an effort to change things most of the time. You know, most of them have given up, and those who want to do the right thing are just leaving Congress because they're just so frustrated. They're quitting. So I want to set an example and say, look, you don't have to quit Congress. You don't have to stop fighting, but you should rethink the strategy. And that's what I've done. I've rethought the strategy, and that it's better to represent you as an independent, and it would be better if we had more of that in Congress, independent-minded people. And even if they're within the parties, it would be better to have more independent-minded Republicans and independent-minded Democrats. And I don't want people to confuse independent-minded with like squishy policy positions or anything, or they don't have strong views. People should have very strong views, I think, when they come to Congress. They should have principles. They should have a philosophy they hold to. They should have things they told their district they're going to do, how they're going to represent them, and they should hold to those things. But what they shouldn't do is be beholden to the leadership teams or to special interest groups.
Isn't there too much dark money behind all this Citizens United decision back in 2010 where the wealthiest top 1/10 of 1% can get so much money in corporations, and they can do it darkly without any anonymously, and so they can back your leadership in the House and the Senate by giving them money. They can even tell you what to say and script what you should make. They've got these people like this power over that.
I think so. The question's about Citizens United and money in politics. Now, I do think that there is obviously a lot of money in politics, and it's a big problem. And for someone like me who receives almost all of my contributions from individuals, I'm that rare member of Congress who I don't receive very much PAC money. Like it's a very small percentage, certainly less than the Republicans and Democrats in the state of Michigan. And I don't know what it is in the country, but I bet it's like the top 10 or top 5 in terms of just individual donations as a percentage.
Isn't the
So
Supreme Court decision?
I think that, well, no, I disagree with you on the Supreme Court decision on Citizens United. For people who are upset about Citizens United, I think you have to remember that people offer political opinions in all sorts of corporate formats that we often don't think about. Like books are produced by corporations, movies are produced by corporations, and even newspapers are produced by corporations. And the reason we allow all of these formats to give their opinion, even though there may be dark money behind them or some hidden donors, is because we have a First Amendment. And we believe that regardless of the way you're speaking, you should be allowed to offer your position on things. And sometimes that means people get together and they form a corporation and they sell a book or sell a movie, or they might run an ad on TV. And so it becomes hard to distinguish what's the difference between an ad on TV or some kind of sketch comedy where they're maybe presenting a particular political viewpoint. So we have to be really careful about First Amendment issues when it comes to money in politics. I do think it's a big problem. I would say that in the state legislature, where I served for one term before I went to Congress, the lobbyists have definitely more direct influence on the members of the state legislature than they do in Congress. In Congress, the lobbyists have some influence on the leadership, and then the leadership have influence on the members. But it goes in a different direction.
That's the problem.
Yeah, the leaders, and this is why it should be more deliberative, and it shouldn't be run by 3 people. So the lobbyists give the money to the leaders, and the leaders basically control the members. So that's a huge problem at the federal level. But honestly, if you want to get money out of politics, the best thing you can do is not have the federal government so involved in everything. It's pretty obvious that if the federal government has its hands in everything, there will be lots of money in politics. There's no doubt about that. Whether it's individual donations or PAC donations or corporations getting involved, if they see a place where all the action is, Congress or government, that's where they're going to go with their money. So you're better off having this stuff dispersed, as our Constitution intended, dispersed across the country. That's why we have a system of federalism, which means the federal government handles certain issues, the state government handles other issues, local governments handle other issues. It helps dissipate the influence of these lobbyists. Instead of just going, they have a one-stop shop, really. They can go to Speaker Pelosi and Leader McConnell, and they can say, this is what we want. It's just like one-stop shopping for them. You should make it more difficult for them by dispersing all of these actions across the 50 states, which is the way it was intended, and that would actually lessen their influence on things. It would decrease because it would be harder to get involved. And the states would handle then many more things, and actually it would be harder for the lobbyists to influence each of the individual states because there are more issues at hand. Right now, the federal government is handling so much that they can just stop over there and get everything in one stop.
Over here.
Yeah, I'll go here.
So Justin, especially for Michael, I'm wondering if the issues you're talking about in Washington, if there could be a constitutional amendment of some sort that might help things. And the second part of that is, if there are a number of people who go independent like you, is there, I mean, you want to be able to support each other, so does that mean an existing party or a new party?
It doesn't really matter to me what kind of party people have. Like, if people want to be independent, or if they want to be Republicans or Democrats or Libertarians or Greens, that's all fine with me. At the end of the day, what really matters is you shouldn't be beholden to one party. In other words, if you feel like, you know, your views generally align with this party or that party, I think it's fine to be a part of a party. You know, people are going to form organizations, they're going to get together. They form associations all the time outside of politics. The same thing is going to happen in politics. I don't have a problem with that. I do think if you're so beholden to a party that you give them everything, you give them your soul basically, and you say just whatever you want, it's yours, then you've got a problem. If you watch, and same with people at home, if you watch Fox News at night and you think everything is accurate and you just, whatever Sean Hannity said, that's what I'm doing, then you've got a problem too. Or if you watch MSNBC and you say whatever Rachel Maddow says, that's what I'm doing, then you've got a problem. You have to think for yourself. I think that's really important. I don't know that there's any constitutional amendment that would fix this issue. I think we have a very good constitution. We just need to follow it. And we don't follow it right now. We totally ignore it in so many ways. And you know, in the past few years, it's gotten worse and worse. And now I don't think Congress even really controls the appropriations process. If a president doesn't like how we're appropriating money, he just says it's an emergency, and he handles it himself. So we have to move back to a process where Congress is involved, all of Congress is involved, and we are representing all of the people, not just some of the people. Yes, sir.
Yeah, specifically, what is your plan for 2020?
For what?
For 2020?
What is my plan for 2020? I'm running for a re-election as an independent in this district. So,
As a Congress? Or?
U.S. Congress, yes. Yes, sir.
Have you announced that yet?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. Although, for some reason, I don't know, sometimes the media don't cover it quite right.
Oh, really?
No offense to media who are here, but I've said it, but then I'll tell it to like some people in the media, and then they'll say, what are you running for? And I'll say, well, I just told you like last week.
Yeah.
And they'll ask me again.
Trump didn't say he was going to squash this.
So, we haven't been squashed yet. So, I think it is, it's important that we have an independent voice out there representing our district. But I don't want to be conclusory about anything. I always leave things open and say, I look at the whole landscape and I think about how I can be most effective. And if I can be effective in some other way that would advance liberty and defend our Constitution and uphold our principles, I'm willing to consider that.
Probably most famously, I think Democratic nominee Christine Gillibrand has advanced this idea of public funding for campaigns. Could you comment on that as an idea, or?
Yeah, I don't support public funding of campaigns.
No.
As you may be able to tell, I'm not a fan of government, and I think it would be worse. Now, I'm being facetious. The government is fine if it's operating properly, within the proper scope. But I think it would be dangerous to give the government more power over elections. I don't think that's a good idea. I certainly don't want one administration or another having even more influence on an election. And I don't think it's a good idea that your tax dollars would have to go to someone you are totally against. I gave this example at the last stop, if you're a Democrat, do you really want your tax dollars going to Steve King for his reelection? Or, if you're a Republican, you want to going to, name your Democrat, AOC or someone else. People want to be able to spend their money, if they're going to spend it, on the person they support. I don't think they want their tax dollars going to people they don't support. Yes, sir.
I came here for a specific issue, but relative to what you're talking about, pretty much I think everybody in Congress and the government should be forced to sit down and watch Schoolhouse Rock. And we need to get civics education back to the schools, or what you're trying to do is almost impossible. What I came to talk about was small business. Basically, totally different than what
Speak a little louder, please.
Sure. I came here to talk about small business. Right now, there's federal overreach everywhere, and then you have the state on top of that. What I'd like to really see, and I don't, based on the picture you painted, I'm not sure how possible it is, but I'd like to see things open up that allow the entrepreneurial spirit to grow. Right now, it is not that way. The burden of taxes, payroll tax, everything just crushes us. These guys did a great job. I'm happy for them. We're up the street. It's a struggle. And I know you're not big on government intervention, neither am I. But sometimes I think there can't be a hands-off. I'm going to give you a prime example. I brought this for you. If you have a staffer here, I'll leave it for you. Amazon. Started out of a garage, Wahoo, got big, but Amazon and Google is out of control. In this article right here, Amazon controls 2/3 of all auto parts sales. When does that become a problem? Something needs to be looked at to help balance the playing field. We all know things change. The malls changed Main Street. The internet changed malls. Okay, you got to roll with it. However, to your point of too much power being in too few hands, it works here too.
So, without speaking directly about Amazon, I would say that a lot of times when companies get too big, they have some help from the government.
Absolutely.
And so I would not be helping companies. I don't believe in government intervention in that way. I certainly don't want to have the government come in and give special favors, especially to the biggest companies out there, to beat up on everyone else. But I generally believe you should get the government out of that stuff, not have the government deciding who wins and who loses, have a level playing field where everyone can compete. And if you do that, over time, the companies that get big, as long as they're not being propped up by the government, they will find competitors at some point. Someone will come and knock them down a peg or two, or 3 or 4. If you look at the biggest companies from decades ago, you'll find that many of them are no longer the biggest companies, or no longer around. So things change. Sometimes it's gradual, and we have to accept that. And of course, sometimes it negatively affects our own businesses and other things. But you can't have the government come in and try to stunt progress by saying, well, we think this company is better than that company. So whether it's the big guys or even the small guys, I like to keep government out and not try to freeze it in place with whatever we have now.
I think that's it. I think all people that have small businesses want is an opportunity, not asking for a guaranteed outcome. Just don't want to get switched because somebody's getting a different set of rules.
Absolutely.
Than the rest of them.
And to piggyback on that point, and I hear that a lot, and that's one of my concerns. When people talk about welfare, and especially I hear that on the right, too much welfare. But a lot of welfare goes to big corporations. A lot of welfare is going to rich people. And I think that is not talked about enough. That you have sometimes the people who are the wealthiest who can then go and reach out to people in government and say, hey, could we get a special loan, or could we get a special grant or whatever? And you sometimes have very rich people getting millions of dollars. And then people will say, well, but they're creating jobs. Well, sure, but if you give anyone millions of dollars, they create jobs. Like, if I give you millions of dollars, you'll create jobs. That's how government works. You know, like if they hand out taxpayer money to people, yeah, of course those people are going to create some jobs, but they're taking money away from other people. And they are creating unfair competition at times, too. They might support one guy with government grants or benefits, and then across the street he's got a smaller competitor, and that person's put out of business. So it needs to be fair, and that's why we got to get the government out of there and stop giving corporate welfare to the very wealthiest people.
Yeah, you mentioned before about good economic times we are going through.
Yeah.
Can you share with us how much you know about how many farmers are committing suicide here because the business went bad?
Yeah, I
I'm
don't.
talking about small farmers,
Yeah.
not the guys who have those cases.
Yep.
Where you know, they confine animals, feeding operations for millions or thousands of cows in these confined places, getting all the money. And some farmers don't get any money. Dairy farmers are closing every day in the country.
Yeah.
And also, on one side, the president said that the Chinese are paying a lot of money for the tariff is applied to them. They said they're going to get a fraction of the dollar. That's what they're paying.
Yeah.
But they're getting, they're going ahead and they're fighting it pretty good.
Yeah.
Kind of,
So I think the.
Coupled with that,
Yeah.
we also address what we hear about the truckers now, because they kind of coincide.
I can't hear.
You have to tell me more about the trucks, but let me cover this farmers one first. So.
Justin, will you kind of rephrase this question?
Yeah, so he's talking about how many farmers are struggling. And I've heard that from many farmers. I've had farmers come to my office telling me they're struggling, and a lot of times it's the smaller farmers. And what's happening is you're getting a lot of consolidation where they are having to sell because they're struggling and they're selling to bigger farms, and then those farms get even bigger and it becomes a very large corporation in a sense. And a lot of this has to do with immigration policies and tariff policies. And I think in both respects, this administration has been harmful to farming, has made it difficult for a lot of farmers in our district, because I've had many of them come to me and talk to me about it. And, you know, I think when they come, they try not to be too hard on the president, but you can see what's going on. They're really upset about it, and they're struggling as a result of many of the policies. So we should not have these tariffs that you've talked about. I think tariffs are a bad idea. They're a tax on Americans. They make it more difficult for American companies, and ultimately American taxpayers end up paying them. And I think they're likely having some effect on the economy right now. When we see a little bit of a downturn, I think it's likely because some of these policies have been in place. And on immigration, we need to make it easier for people to come here legally. You know, people talk about illegal immigration, and that is definitely a concern, and we shouldn't have illegal immigration. But one of the best solutions is to provide for more legal immigration. There's no reason people shouldn't be allowed to come here legally, participate in the system here, provide employment here, and be a part of our society, be a part of our fabric of our society. You know, if you want people who come here to learn English, to become part of our culture, to assimilate easily, the best way you can do it is to allow them to come here legally rather than illegally. You'll probably have the same number of people here, same number of immigrants, but a higher percentage will be legal. And instead of hiding, they'll be interacting with everyone in society and learning English and making friends and actually integrating with everyone. And I think that would really improve things. And depending on the part of the farming community, this does have an impact on farmers as well, because there are many jobs in the farming industry where people who are coming from other countries are more equipped to do those jobs or prefer those jobs compared to what many American-born people prefer. You know, a lot of American-born people are not as inclined to do some of these jobs, and you have people coming in from other countries who are happy to do it because it is a big improvement over what they were experiencing before. So we should be considerate of that. Yes.
Yeah, a lot of the controversy surrounding you in the last 6 months, maybe a year,
has come as a result of your comments that Donald Trump committed an impeachable offense. I think a lot of that came from the Mueller report, a report that Robert Mueller himself did not write. He did not believe. I understood you say you read the 460-some pages, and I trust you on that. One thing he spoke of even here was Trump's unpresidential conduct.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the problems you brought up in Congress, they've been there for years. They were there before you were a congressman. They go back, not quite so bad, but when it was the 5th District with Gerald Ford, Harold Sawyer, I mean, some of those problems existed then.
Yep.
But it wasn't until this Mueller report that you changed your stance. Now, let's look at what's presidential and not presidential.
Well, first, I want to correct you.
My kids learned about
changed
oral
my
sex
stance.
from
Yeah.
Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, Janet Reno ignored subpoenas. Barack Obama, Eric Holder,
Yep.
Loretta Lynch ignored subpoenas. You were a congressman under Barack Obama, yet you never brought anything up. But now,
But that's not
Donald
true.
Trump does, and now when Bill Barr does.
But I have to, I just have to stop you though, because that's not true. And this kind of, false statement you're making is what a lot of people who are, the diehard President Trump loyalists will bring up. They'll say, well, Justin Amash, you ever criticized Obama? Anyone who knows me and has followed me, you can just go to my Twitter. If anything, I
Were you
criticized.
as outspoken against him?
Yeah, I think I was more outspoken actually. And actually, if anything, I have learned a little bit from my time starting out where, in retrospect, I think I was, my attitude wasn't always right. I think that I improved over time. And I think I am more respectful as a representative now than I would have been 8 years ago or 6 years ago. I think I'm a better representative now and a better person in many respects. I look back and I criticize President Obama for things that I don't think I would criticize President Trump for. And I now see that I had some blind spots. And I think that's important for all of us to recognize, to look back and think about it. And it really does upset me when people say what you're saying, which is, oh, you never said anything about Obama. Because actually, if anything, I was harder on President Obama. I called for Eric Holder to resign. I said Loretta Lynch had never been approved by the Senate. I've been after people on the left for things that I thought were wrong for a long time. But if anything, I think I was maybe a little bit too hard at times and should have been more careful about some of the things. And now I think I'm more respectful. So we all can learn, we all can grow, we can all become better, and that's part of what I'm trying to do here as a representative. And I hope we'll all have some self-reflection and not jump to the conclusion that just because someone is criticizing a president you like, then, oh, they must not have ever criticized someone you didn't like or someone from the other party. I've been equal opportunity on that. And I think we all can find ways to be more respectful to each other and nicer to each other. And frankly, I've let Trump get away with some things that maybe I would not have let President Obama get away with. I think my approach is better now. I think my attitude is better now than it was back then.
Okay, on the Trump impeachment.
Yeah.
Okay, what article or amendment do you base that?
What article of what?
Okay,
Of the Constitution.
of the Constitution.
It's the impeachment article of the Constitution.
Which article number?
It's I don't know the specific number.
How many articles are there? 7. How many amendments?
27. 27.
27, okay. All right.
Lighten up, guys.
He did watch school.
Yeah. So, who's yeah, I'll go.
I'm concerned about our election. What are we doing to protect 2020?
What are we going to protect 2020?
Yeah.
Well, I think we
Should
can.
we be doing? Should we be doing anything? Should you be doing something? I mean, what can we do?
So, I think we should be doing more, but that's really something that the executive branch has to get a handle on. I mean, there are already laws in place, and I think that we could, for example, ensure that people have paper backups of everything. What I would not like to see, though, is a uniform system across the country. I think that would be bad. Like, if we made everything uniform and had one standard for the entire country, in terms of, you know, you're all going to use this system, I think that would be risky, because one of the strengths of our system is that it's very decentralized, and that it's just run by people at different precincts, and they're not really connected to each other, and it's not all tied into one computer system. I think that's actually a strength of our system, because it makes it harder to infiltrate. But you know, you could require people to use things like paper copies, which we do in Michigan. You have a paper ballot, so you could require that they use paper copies in every state rather than these machines where you press a button. I don't really trust the computers as much. It's obviously more prone to error than a paper copy. So you could have paper copy backups, but I don't want to see it all centralized. Yes, sir.
Started out with tamping down incendiary rhetoric.
Yeah.
And one thing specific that I would like eliminated from the discourse is, when you disagree with someone, it does not mean that that other person is unpatriotic, un-American, and in the case of not wanting $2 trillion spent on a military budget, does not mean that they hate the troops.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. I firmly agree with you on that. Absolutely.
So changing topics a little bit. I really respect that you've become an independent. I consider myself an independent. I agree wholeheartedly that a lot of things need to be at a local level. One thing, however, that I know you and I disagree on, I think it's become incredibly a national epidemic at this point. From my own experience as a student at Virginia Tech in 2007 and an employee on the Washington Navy Yard in 2013, I've been to way too many funerals, and we need to do something about gun violence. I understand that people have rights. I understand that people should have the ability to bear arms, but if I hear one more time that people knew that someone had an issue and that they were unstable, or that they had whatever it was, people have hit lists, whatever they have, and they were legally able to obtain a weapon to kill 9 people in a matter of 30 seconds, there's a problem that we need to solve, and that's not something that's going to get solved on a local level. That's something that we need to manage at a national level. I understand that you might disagree with that. It's already passed through the House to do some universal background checks. Mitch McConnell won't do anything about it. What can we do? Yes. I'm terrified to send my children to school. I'm terrified to go to church. I'm terrified to go to the supermarket. What do I do?
So you're right that we have a disagreement on it. The first thing I would say is you don't need to be terrified of all this stuff. I understand. I know you've had an experience with it. I understand that, but I will assure you that statistically it is not a common thing. So I think there are a lot of people who are very afraid, but statistically it is not very common. And compared to the other risks we face every day, including driving a car, there are many things that are far riskier to our lives, where we're far more likely. So I just want to make sure.
Every time it happens to me, my kid's gonna die.
One airplane goes down, they take them out of the sky.
I understand that. So I appreciate that you've been through many circumstances like that. I know your concerns, but it is still statistically a rare thing.
We can still do something about it. People that have issues shouldn't have weapons that can kill that many people in that small amount of time.
I think when we look at the proposals, we always have to think about, will the proposal actually produce the outcome that you want? So if you look at, take universal background checks, and we've seen these recent ones on TV. In every single case, there were background checks in these recent incidents, and in every incident that I can think of where we've had some sort of televised event where we've seen it, there were background checks or the weapon was obtained illegally. So there have been no circumstances that I can think of where someone did not have a background check and the whole thing was, and the ability to get the gun was legal.
That was Virginia Tech.
So I don't know. I'll take your word for it, but it is an exceedingly rare circumstance. It doesn't happen often, and I'll take your word for it on Virginia Tech. But my understanding is that in the vast majority of incidents, there are background checks that happen, because there are background checks currently. When people talk about universal background checks, there are people who, I think, believe that there aren't many background checks going on right now. But in almost all gun purchases, there are background checks. Now, there are private transfers that happen where they might not do a background check, but if you transfer a weapon to someone and they commit a crime, you can be criminally liable. So in those private transfers, people are very reluctant to transfer to someone they don't know really well. So almost all of those private transfers will happen, for example, to a close relative or someone that they can trust. If you transferred it to some stranger or someone you thought might commit a crime, you'd be in big trouble if they went and did something with that gun. So that doesn't happen that often. So I just want to make sure that whatever we look at, that it actually makes sense, actually improves the situation, and is respectful of people's rights. So you know how I believe about the Second Amendment. I believe very strongly in protecting our right to keep and bear arms. I believe very strongly in things like the Fourth Amendment and the Fifth Amendment. So people talk about red flag laws, and there are serious due process problems that can be incorporated into red flag laws, where you take something away without due process, or you have a seizure that is a violation of the Fourth Amendment, because the Fourth Amendment doesn't allow you to seize someone's property without probable cause and a warrant. And the probable cause is probable cause that a crime has been committed or is being committed. It's not just probable cause that the person is risky. So you have to show some evidence that they're committing a crime or have committed a crime. So I think the best line of defense is still going to be family members and friends who know people who are unstable or who are saying things that are, inappropriate or dangerous. I think that's the best line of defense.
So they're
to
just
say,
supposed to confront that person and hope that
I
they
think-
do something about it, and I'm just supposed to have a sense of comfort that everyone else is going to do the right thing?
I don't know that I or anyone else can give you a sense of comfort because of what you've been through. I understand that.
But more
So
and more
I understand
people
that,
are
but
joining
I
my
think
club, unfortunately.
I think that people don't have to be worried about it on a day-to-day basis. It is an exceedingly rare circumstance.
And yet we keep hearing about it more.
We do hear about them, but it's exceedingly rare. And if you look at historically the rate of crimes by guns, it's actually decreased over the last several decades. Now we have had a recent uptick, and we have had more of these incidents where it's like a school shooting or something like that. But the number is still very small in the scheme of things, as far as risks that you face every day. So I know that will never be fully satisfactory, especially to someone in your position, but
I feel like I have to, for the rest of my life, make sure that I'm doing something to try to prevent this from happening to someone else.
Good for you. I'll join your club.
And join her club too. Yourself being an independent, it's beautifully that you don't have to follow the Republican or the Democratic stand. You can do what's right. I am sure majority of Americans do not believe there's any reason for anyone to own a weapon, an automatic that can kill 50 people in 1 minute. That is not what the Constitution was written for.
Right.
They never visualized what we would have today. So I think we need to keep that in mind.
I disagree with that, because at the time the founders wrote that, the military had the same weapons the civilians did. So they fully understood that.
And I
no, seriously, I wanted to add, I don't really feel because I know people who lost family, but I wanted to add to what Representative Amash said. Remember Timothy McVeigh and the FBI building? Remember the Boston bombing? Those people who have evil in their heart, or if you're a person of faith who believes truly in evil, they're going to find a way. None of those things involve guns. So I think we do have to do something.
We have a responsibility to our children.
We do, but you know what? Just like he said, I ride a motorcycle. I know the risk. Motorcycle fatalities are far worse than.
That's just affecting you.
To you individually.
So just, I'm really late for my next stop, but, so, the people at the next stop are not going to be happy. But I want to say, first, I thank you for being respectful for the way, you know, we've talked about this. I think we could talk about Second Amendment all day also. I think it's an important, it's a very important issue. It's a very important issue, and I think we could, you know, add so many layers to the discussion and talk about it. And at some other stops, I've also had longer discussions about it. And I hope that when you do discuss it with each other, discuss other issues, that you stay respectful and understand people come from different places. Some people have particular upbringings where they very much value the right to keep and bear arms, and other people have been in incidents like yours where they have suffered and have felt, you know, afraid of guns and what they can do. So we have to respect each other and understand each other's circumstances, and I think we should always try to find compromises where we can, but we have to also protect our rights as Americans and make sure that we are not infringing on people's ability to enjoy their lives the way our Constitution has laid it out. You know, to enjoy the right to keep bear arms, the right to free speech, the right to be secure against unreasonable searches and seizures, all these rights that are laid out in our Bill of Rights. I think we need to respect those things as well. So let's always be respectful of each other, and I'll just leave it on thanking you again. Thanks so much to Railtown for having us here today, and I hope you. I hope this has been a useful discussion for everyone, and I hope to keep having them, and just keep being respectful to each other and kind to each other, because we need much more of that, and I think we can do a better job solving our problems if we do that. And please stay on top of your government to open up the process. Let people debate ideas. Let Mitch McConnell bring the legislation to the floor. If people want to vote yes or no, let them allow them to take their own position on it. I'm happy to defend my position, and others in Congress, whether they're on the right and the left, should feel comfortable defending their own position in the Senate or in the House based on what they believe. I think that's how it should work. So thanks so much, everyone.